We are back at our fifth installment of Dallas Influences, Sport and Entertainment's virtual speaker series. My name is Carla Rosenberg, and as president of DISE, I am delighted to welcome each of you. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. With the absence of live sport and working from home, last month we kicked off our virtual speaker series with the hope to be able to offer a platform for meaningful content and connection to not only our members, but to anyone who is keen to glean insight into the current state of the sports industry. We have been fortunate to feature sports and entertainment leaders across a variety of sectors. And with 4 speaker series under our belt, our plan is to continue doing this for another 4 weeks, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time for 30 minutes. And it's free. So please register each week and share this with others that might be interested. And for those of you that are tuning in for the first time and not familiar with DISE, I just want to take a brief moment and share a bit about this organization. Our members are DFW area professionals who are employed by or connected to sports and entertainment organizations. We host multiple events per year for members that focus on providing professional development, networking, and charitable activities. To that end, we are proud to share that we've provided over $700,000 to area nonprofits since 2013. As I mentioned, we use our platform to give back. Right now, our food banks are struggling to keep up with demand for food. So funds raised through these speaker series will be donated to the North Texas Food Bank and allocated toward family box meals. Our friends at the Dallas Stars Foundation, the Texas Rangers Foundation, and the Dallas Mavericks have each stepped up and offered to match up to $5,000 of the funds we raised during these weekly speaker series. As of today, we've raised $2,910. With our matching gifts from the respective teams, our current total is $11,640. Let's continue to reach our fundraising goal so that we can maximize our matching and provide meals for so many families in need during this time. Every dollar makes a difference. And I'll make sure to add this donation link to the chat section so that those of you who wish to contribute may do so. Before we start our exciting program today, I want to let you all know that there is an opportunity to ask questions throughout the segment using the Q&A feature below. In addition, we will have a poll. You should all see that pop up on your screens now. I ask that all audience members please go ahead and fill this out so that we have the chance to address these results during the discussion. Okay, let's get this conversation started and meet our moderator and keynote speaker. Our moderator is none other than Kern Egan, who is the co-founder and chairman of DISE. I also have the privilege of working with him on a daily basis as he serves as the President Americas of Lagardère Plus, Lagardère Sports and Entertainment's global partnership marketing agency. Joining Kern today is our featured speaker, Casey Clark, who is Senior Vice President, Strategic Communications at the American Gaming Association. In his role, Casey is responsible for developing and executing upon a comprehensive communication strategy to protect and enhance the reputation of the $261 billion gaming industry. Prior to joining AGA, Casey has extensive experience in corporate crisis and advocacy communication in global business consultancy. He served as managing director at both FTI and Burson Marsteller and managed a wide range of client relationships, including public and private companies in highly scrutinized industries, trade associations, and nonprofit organizations. His positioning experience includes award-winning comprehensive communication programs comprising issues advocacy, messaging, corporate responsibility, traditional and social media relations, industry relations, and CEO positioning. Casey resides in Arlington, Virginia with his wife and 3 children, and we are grateful to have him join us today. As you can tell, all bets are off. So I'll hand this over to Kern to get this started.
Wow, kicking us off with a bad pun. You are getting way too comfortable at this little introduction thing, Carla. But thank you for that introduction as always. Welcome everyone. Nice to see so many people join us again this week. And thanks for your continued support and everything that you're doing and the way you support us really is helping people in need right now in terms of providing meals to people who might not be having the easiest time getting through this. So thank you, everyone. Casey, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, Kern, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I don't think, just a few years ago, we would have thought that sports betting would be one of those topics that we'd really want to get at the forefront of our kind of sports business conversation. But, here we are, where it's now one of the most important topics, or most interesting at least. Can you kind of maybe start off with just giving us an idea of sort of the state of play in the sports betting industry?
Yeah, you bet. I think it's an interesting thing that's evolved so quickly, right? Only a couple of years ago, the sports business, and particularly the leagues, were kind of adversaries with the gaming industry as it comes to how to legalize this or whether it should even be legalized. And so we worked really hard at the AGA to ensure we were informing the public narrative about the dangers of the illegal market and the opportunities that exist in the regulated legal one for consumer protections. And really, it's been an absolute whirlwind in the last 2 years. So as of last week, it's been 2 years since the Supreme Court invalidated the federal prohibition on sports betting. And the kind of uptake on that's been pretty quick. We've had, went from essentially one market in Nevada in 2018 to 23 now, including 22 states, and DC now have legalized sports betting. And so it's all taking off really quickly.
There's certainly a lot of progress being made. You mentioned some data points about just sort of the legalization happening sort of state by state. Obviously, we're in a big one here in Texas. Can you kind of let us know sort of what's happening here in Texas, and how that might relate to those states that might be adopting this sort of faster or slower?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a better answer for you about how quickly things would happen in Texas. I think that it's one of those few states that has really limited legal gambling in general, with a couple of tribal properties as well as a lottery. But so there was a bill introduced in 2019 that never made it out of committee. I'd be surprised if we saw anything next year. Basically, the politics in Texas would require a referendum that would go to the people. And I think there's considerate political opposition to expanding legal gambling in the state. So, but if you look at where this has taken off, there's been a lot of regional pressure, and certainly Texas should be feeling that. Oklahoma, New Mexico, certainly leading the way. Louisiana legalizing and being actually one of the first states to reopen their properties post-COVID too. So there's a lot of regional pressure that goes into getting some of these states online. If you look at where the trends have been and how states have decided to pursue this, that has been one of the leading factors. If you look at the early adopters, there were big mature sports betting or even just betting markets in New Jersey, obviously Mississippi, Pennsylvania, really kicked off the kind of trend. But then you saw a lot of regional pressure to get West Virginia coming online, and Delaware, places here in the Mid-Atlantic where I live, saw a lot of that, and you're seeing that expand into the Midwest too. So I think wouldn't count Texas out yet, but it's certainly not something I'd see happening anytime soon.
Well, speaking of kind of how fast this industry is, getting legalized or adopted on a state-by-state basis, obviously COVID-19 has had a major impact on the business of sports. Probably many people watching now, especially certainly my business and the gaming industry as a whole, I would imagine. So, what's the impact been, of the pandemic so far? Does that impact, potentially the legalization and the time frame for that on a state-by-state basis, given what might be happening from a tax revenue standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, we're not alone in being an industry that's been devastated by the pandemic, but certainly it's affected us almost disproportionately. If you think about us as a global industry, we were first hurt by this outbreak in China that affected the Macau operations. It affected tourism coming out of China and into the U.S. market to support gaming. And then ultimately, our entire industry has been shuttered. Every casino in the country was shut down. It's the first time that's ever happened. And that impacts not just people who work at a casino, but also the suppliers who really work hard to make sure that the supply chain is fulfilled, and that there are anybody who's looking to buy new machines or new product for their casinos is also, that's all been stopped too. And if you look at who we are as a business beyond just the gaming floor, we have a lot of different amenities that kind of make up an integrated resort property, from conventions and meetings businesses to hotels to high-end retail and restaurants. And of course, all of that has been stopped. And so we've been almost disproportionately affected by the pandemic, but I think we're hoping that we're starting to see some glimmer of hope of what coming back into the marketplace might look like, and how we might be able to come out of this. It's going to be a long haul, I think, for all of us. But if you think about what it's done for sports betting, I'd say a couple of things. One is it hasn't really slowed anything. Any state that had ongoing legislation has continued to pursue some of these things. There's been some legalization and even some operalization. So states that have already legalized it have become operational during this time, even though there's no sports to really bet on per se. So they'll be ready to go as soon as that starts to roll back out. And I think what you'll see after all this is a significant budget hole that all these states are going to be in, and they really rely on gaming revenue and other tourism and other taxation revenue to really fund critical programs and infrastructure that are really going to be giant holes to fill. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw a further acceleration of legalization in the coming months.
Has anything else kind of good happened out of this? I mean, you and I had a joke about Russian ping pong, Australian horse racing. I mean, certainly people interested in sports betting will find their opportunities. Do you think the operators are learning anything out of this kind of forced change in consumer behavior?
Yeah, if you're a big fan of Belarusian soccer and betting on Belarusian soccer, I think this was a decent time for you, although you had kind of increased competition, so maybe more odds being offered. But I mean, I think if you look at who we are as an industry, we've been pretty innovative in terms of thinking through what consumers want and how do we meet that demand, if that be that on a casino floor or a mobile app for sports betting or whatever those offerings might look like to ensure that we're meeting demand. I think one of the biggest myths that I've been facing, at least in the communication business on the betting side since all this has come about, is that this is somehow some new opportunity or some new thing. I mean, Americans have been betting on sports for decades. What we've just helped to unlock here is really the opportunity for them to do it in a safe, regulated environment and out of the shadows, and with a lot more increased protection for that activity. So I think what you'll see is continued innovation on the kinds of offerings that books will offer. I think you'll see that when casinos reopen in terms of what gaming floors look like. And I think you'll continue to see that from us in an ongoing basis. But I don't, the one thing that I think one advancement, or at least a policy priority that's been an interest of the casino business for a long time, has been thinking about who we are as an operation, as an entertainment operation. We are one of the last bastions of cash in the country outside of yard sales and pawn shops. So we are looking at opportunities as consumers continue to demand fewer or less contact with their consuming choices, and how do they make payments, and what those behaviors look like. So I think there could be some modernization there. And we're certainly hopeful and working with regulators that we can get to a place that allows for increased visibility into where money is coming from, increased ability for consumers to set limits, and all the kinds of things that we promote in our ongoing responsible gaming activities. I think there's greater ability to do that with some modernized payment options.
When it comes to legalizing sports betting in a specific state, I'm not sure everyone knows exactly how that gets rolled out. When does it happen? Is it in phases? Is it certain sports, that come first? Is it retail versus mobile? I know it can vary state by state, but maybe kind of tell us how that, generally sort of works and gets, once approved, actually executed upon.
I'll give you a terrible answer, which is it really depends. I mean, each market is really different, and that's true for the gaming industry writ large. It's not just about sports betting. I mean, every market, if you look at Texas, for example, it's got a couple of tribal properties and a lottery. You look at Nevada, obviously that model is much different, but there's a lot of how to regulate gaming a little bit differently. And every state is thinking about how to come online a little bit differently. And so it's going to be an interesting proposition as we think through what this means for sports gaming. But I think each state is looking at different regulatory oversight, different offerings. I mentioned 23 markets have now legalized sports betting. There's 16 of those that have legalized some sort of mobile wagering. including some markets like Tennessee who never had casino gambling, brick and mortar casino gambling, and now offer mobile sports wagering. So it's really a different model for every jurisdiction. And so it's going to be dependent upon what consumers want in each of those places.
And how much money are we talking about? I know, again, it depends, but we talk about there could be some, obvious lost tax revenue and some, obvious budget pressure that comes out of this pandemic. Sports betting seems to be a new revenue stream, for states. So kind of tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, I think it's a new revenue stream, not just for states, but for sports books and for leagues and teams and other people in the sports business too. This is, I think it's important to look at the economics of sports betting for casino gaming operators. It's a fairly low margin business. We don't keep a lot of the money. Most of it gets paid back to winning bets. And then you have to pay the overhead of offering that technology and offering, how you staff it, how do you pay taxes on it. So the hold or how much the casino keeps in any kind of amount wagered is pretty limited on the sports betting side, but it's a great amenity and it brings new people into properties. About $1.5 billion in sportsbook revenue has been generated since PASPA was overturned in 2018, and about $190 million has been generated just on sportsbook taxation for states and local governments alone. So it's not an insignificant amount of money when you think about how you fund critical programs and what those dollars mean to communities. And we're pretty proud of the opportunities that we have to give that opportunity to those communities.
They distribute winnings back. I'm not familiar with that part of the.
I appreciate that.
Well, I know the casino industry is quite mature, and there's a lot of brand names that people know. Caesars, MGM being obvious ones. There's the daily fantasy sports operators like DraftKings, FanDuel. People are now fairly familiar with. We have an influx of kind of mobile first operators with lots of experience from Europe, Asia, et cetera. Kind of talk to us about the operator sort of ecosystem and how we should sort of be thinking about retail versus mobile, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit like I just mentioned. It's an amenity for a lot of traditional brick and mortar casino facilities and operators. But there's certainly a lot of people who are offering innovative products, and you've seen the DFS guys that you just talked about particularly interesting because they were, they weren't in the real money wagering business until not long ago, and now have kind of taken a hold. So you see brands like DraftKings and FanDuel and William Hill that's had a big footprint in the UK for a long time, really expanding their footprint across the United States. And I think that there's a lot we can learn and benefit from those providers who've got experience in the sports betting business from more mature sports betting markets than the US. But there's also a lot to be said for brand equity. And I think that, like you mentioned, MGM's got great brand equity, Caesars, Las Vegas Sands, Penn National, who's just partnered up with Barstool. There's a lot of really interesting partnerships and commercial deals happening too that are bringing not just the gaming industry together from technology providers and operators, but also from the sports business and the teams and leagues looking to partner more robustly with the gaming industry.
Yeah, it just seems like consumers, once they got hit with FanDuel and DraftKings, it's sort of, wow, I not only have something new to do, but now I have to figure out who I'm going to actually partner with. It seems like we're going to, potentially see that again with a lot of new players entering the space.
I think not only will you see it from kind of who are the innovative offerings or where are the innovative offerings coming from, but I think you're going to continue to see more official partnerships happening with leagues and betting operators, and you'll start to see teams having partners like that. There's been more than 80 commercial partnerships since the PASPA decision happened in May of 18. So, this is going to continue to take off as an opportunity. We did some research early on about how those entities might monetize this opportunity. There's to the tune of more than $4 billion in opportunity for the major four sports leagues in the U.S. just from increased fan engagement, broadcast opportunities, things like that. So there's certainly real opportunity for a lot of people in this business, but our focus has always been on getting it right, ensuring that the right kind of protections are in place and all the right laws that are coming out to ensure that consumers have the right kind of protections and that people are encouraged to really engage in this the right way.
Yeah, you mentioned the commercial aspects on the team and league side. I've been saying for years that we were in a bubble from a sports perspective, simply because of the live TV, the fragmentation of the media landscape, the last bastion of attention grabbing content with sports, and that drove a lot of the pricing, the investment in around the industry. But we're basically going to see another one, which we're starting to already with sports betting. You now have a very obvious place to increase engagement even more and differentiate it from all the other content opportunities in the marketplace. So it becomes even more attractive, not just for the revenue that's coming from the sports betting industry, but from the all the other typical brands and categories that might spend because of the increased engagement. So you're sitting as the AGA in a very important spot. Let's talk about the role of the AGA. You said your focus is on doing it right. I'd like to talk to you about kind of how you guys are approaching the space, where you're trying to help, what the responsible gaming messaging is, as we've seen in other categories that, have popped up as advertising commercial opportunities. Why don't you just sort of set for the audience kind of what the AGA's role is in all of this?
So, as a trade group, our job is to be the best advocate for the gaming industry and the nearly 2 million Americans whose jobs are supported by gaming. So we spend a lot of our time thinking about what that looks like. And for us, with something like sports betting, it is not just how do we get out of the gate the fastest, but how do we ensure that we're doing this the right way so that it's a prolonged opportunity with the right kind of benefits, not just for the industry, but for our customers who really want this opportunity. And the demand is clear. Our estimates before PASPA was that up to $150 billion a year was being wagered on sports in the U.S. And certainly I don't think that's done anything but accelerate since that ruling. And our opportunity now is to bring those bettors out of the illegal market and into the legal one, and ensure that when they're engaging in this new content and seeing these partnerships in arenas or with their favorite teams, and they're starting to see things a little bit differently, that they know how to engage in this kind of adult entertainment the right way. There are opportunities for people to get more involved and engage with their favorite teams and their favorite leagues and their favorite sports. But that doesn't mean that everyone should do this the same way. Everyone should know what their limits are, and everyone should think about how they could engage in sports betting meaningfully, know the rules of the games you're betting. We joke about Russian ping pong, but I mean, it's one of those things that has attracted a lot of attention during COVID because there isn't a lot else out there. And I think that the opportunity for us and the industry side is ensuring that we're promoting the right way for people to engage in this responsibly. So we've launched a campaign earlier this year with the Vegas Golden Knights, with our partners at Monumental Sports here in DC, who run the Caps and the Wizards, around that's called Have a Game Plan. So we can go to haveagameplan.org and see some of that positioning that really focuses on how consumers can get information if they need help, where they could get it, but how to understand the right way to engage in this opportunity.
You've got to tell the audience about kind of what's been happening in Europe. I thought I fancied myself as somewhat knowledgeable about that part of the commercial space in Europe, and was just really struck by kind of that bell curve, what's happened with the, total increase in commercial opportunities in and around the space, to where it got so over commercialized that regulators stepped in, and it kind of went back down to, where it was before. I don't think really many people in the US kind of understand. They've seen, sports betting advertised a lot, especially in soccer in Europe, but don't really understand kind of really how that's like the acceptance of that has changed very recently. Can you kind of go into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of increased regulatory scrutiny that's either leading to increased consumer awareness, or consumer awareness that's leading to increased regulatory scrutiny. But any way you look at it, people were getting really concerned about the quantity and kind of the inundation of sports content with betting content. And so there was significant backlash in Italy, in the UK, in Belgium. Australia's had similar restrictions where they've really eliminated the ability for betting operators to advertise during sports matches. And in some cases, like Italy, it's a full ban entirely. So our focus in our partnerships with leagues and teams and others in the sports business is not just how do we help monetize this, but really how do we ensure that we're doing this responsibly and doing it the right way so that we're getting ahead of that kind of scrutiny and that kind of backlash in a meaningful way to sustain this opportunity and to protect the consumers who want to do it.
So the responsibility messaging has a lot to do with preserving the commercial opportunity. Would that be
100%? Yeah, I mean, I think it's the quickest way to mess up this opportunity, this kind of newfound vertical in the sports business and this new opportunity for the gaming business is for us to get way out over our skis on promotion and not really thinking about the implications. So our focus is on making sure that people understand the games they're playing, understand the rules of them, understand what their limits are, and understand how to do this the right way. And then from an operator standpoint, the AGA has been working with our members on developing a responsible marketing code for sports wagering that ensures we're meeting key criteria, not advertising in places that we shouldn't be in terms of age restrictions, age gating appropriately on sites and apps that are allowing betting activity. And so there's a lot we can do as an industry, and there's a lot AGA is going to focus on in terms of where we can lead rather than be pushed.
And so to be clear, like in a place like Italy, I think Americans assume sports betting has been so prevalent there, so accepted. You'll see brands of any kind of operator or ancillary business in and around the sports betting space all over the stadium, all over the kits. And it's like, that's just how it is. It's like, auto or insurance sponsors might be in the US and that's because it's accepted and it's successful and it's mature and it's set. But in reality, that got so over commercialized that it went all the way up and then back down to basically zero, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll still see some brand marketing experiences there, right? You might still see some logos on kits, but I don't think you're going to see any advertising. I know you won't see it in Italy. You won't see it kind of whistle to whistle in the UK on Premier League matches in terms of advertising actual gaming or gambling activity. So the brand marketing piece is a little bit separate, but you're not going to inundate consumers who just want to get on and watch their favorite team play on a Sunday. Inundated with sports betting advertisements because it's just not what consumers want, and regulators get overly concerned about the impact of that, and rightly so. So as the US industry is maturing and maturing quickly, we have a real responsibility to ensure that we don't get ourselves in that position.
And and European league executives have been in the US telling us, don't screw this up the way we did, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a lot to learn from more mature sports betting markets. The UK's had legal sports betting longer than they've had a Premier League. So this has been ingrained as part of their culture. It's not something that is unique or new. And their counsel to us before the court even ruled was, you have a real opportunity to learn from the mistakes that we've made and we've learned already, the lumps they've kind of gained through practice, and to really apply those principles early. And we as the industry anyway are certainly working on adhering to that. Yeah,
we don't want to have another speaker series 3 or 5 years from now where we're saying what happened to the sports betting industry.
Yeah. Remember sports betting? Yeah. No, I mean, I think that we'll continue to see this take off in a way that consumers want. Americans bet on sports. Americans want to bet on sports. Our opportunity in it now is to put that into the legal marketplace where there are protections for the integrity of the game, integrity for the protections of the bet, and the consumers who are placing them. There's all sorts of opportunity here if we work together to get it right. And you've heard me say it before, but I think there's a shared responsibility for responsibility here. And we look forward to continuing to working with you and everyone else in the sports business to make sure that we all are marching in the same direction.
Okay, before we wrap up, because we really try to make this a 30-minute thing, can you see the poll? Can everybody see it?
Can't see it.
Oh, okay, here we go. I'm going to share the results. You see it now?
Yep.
So the classic 80-20 rule, perfectly spot on. 80% think Texas will legalize. sports betting. 60% think it'll be 2023 or earlier. There was a couple of comments in the chat about Texas seems to be loosening up a little bit. There's some alcohol to go, legislation that's loosened up, CBD, et cetera. That it feels like it's just, the door's cracking open a little bit. And you think that, would you say 2023 or earlier, or, what would you say today?
I mean, look, I think it depends a little bit on the impact of COVID on the Texas economy to see how much there's a need for additional revenue to come into the state coffers to support critical infrastructure, because there's real opportunity from gaming partnerships that can be had there. But I'm not sure the political will's really there to get it over the finish line in Texas that early, unfortunately. But I think that, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but people in Texas are betting today on sports in Texas. And so the only restriction that's happening is that you're driving Texas consumers to offshore illegal operators who have no concerns over your ability to place the wager, no concerns over, how much you've been betting, how much you should be betting, and no protections for the people who are doing it or guarantees of the payout. I mean, it's an illegal offshore illicit marketplace that preys on consumers and has zero protection. So, in terms of combating the political challenges in Texas, I think the real opportunity is to ensure we continue to highlight that this isn't a new activity. It's not that it's not happening in Texas now. It's just that you're not doing it under any sort of regulatory environment where it's safer for your consumers to do it.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, thanks for your time. I hope everybody learned something. I know I did. And this is probably going to be a topic we need to come back to pretty frequently. And I hope we can rely on you for some great insight and information as always. So we appreciate it. Thank you, Case.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks for having me on.
Lastly, thanks everyone for joining. Can't wait to see you next week. We'll dig more into social media and kind of what's happening in and around the analytics and the performance of digital marketing. I know we'll have Lauren from MVP Index we're excited about, as well as Drew from Toyota, and we're going to have a good, lively conversation next week. Lastly, don't forget, $11,000 raised already. I think that's like, what, Carla, like 33,000 boxed meals for people in the North Texas area that need it. Let's keep going. The link is in the donation links in the chat, or you'll see it in emails following up. So let's keep doing some good for the community while we have the time, and hopefully we'll see everybody next week. So thanks again for joining, and have a good rest of the week. Thanks, everybody.